Admiral Zexhai stood before the massive viewing screen of the Imperial Dreadnought Sovereign's Wrath, watching the sensor readings with growing unease. The third moon of Kepler, 442b, showed no signs of the mining operation that should have been there. Worse yet, the entire colony of 50,000 Vorthack civilians had simply vanished. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the surface," reported Lieutenant Kresh, his scaled fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "The readings are unusual, sir. Unlike anything in our databases. The Galactic Empire had ruled the known systems for over 8 centuries. The Vorthack, as the dominant species, had conquered or absorbed dozens of lesser races. Yet nothing in their vast archives matched what they were seeing now. Send a reconnaissance team to the surface," Zexhai commanded, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "I want to know what happened to our people." 3 hours later, the reconnaissance team returned with footage that would change everything. The mining colony hadn't been destroyed, it had been consumed. The entire settlement, along with its massive extraction equipment, had been reduced to perfectly geometric cuts in the earth. No debris, no bodies, no trace of what had been a thriving operation just weeks ago. "Sir," Lieutenant Kresh's voice trembled slightly. "The analysis team has completed their review. The cuts were made by some form of energy weapon we've never encountered. The precision suggests technology far beyond our capabilities." Admiral Zexhai felt a chill run down his spine. In 800 years of conquest, the Empire had never encountered a force they couldn't overwhelm through sheer military might. Their fleets numbered in the millions, their soldiers in the billions. They had wiped out entire species that dared to resist. "Contact High Command immediately," he ordered, "and increase our patrol formations." Whatever did this might still be in the system. Unknown to the Admiral, deep beneath the surface of Kepler, 442b's third moon, ancient machinery was stirring to life. Machines that had slept for nearly a millennium, built by a species the Empire had thought extinct. The humans had been gone for so long that they existed only in the oldest historical records, filed away as another conquered race. But humanity had not been conquered. They had been preparing. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Sanctuary Base, watching the holographic displays showing the Vorthack fleet above. After 900 years of careful planning, hiding, and building, the moment had finally come. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Chun from his position at the tactical console. "Project Genesis is fully operational." Elena nodded, her weathered face showing the weight of centuries of preparation. Through advanced life extension technology, she had lived to see this day, the day humanity would reclaim their place among the stars. "The Vorthack think we're extinct," she said to the assembled council. "They believe their ancestors wiped us out when they first expanded into our territory. They have no idea that we've spent 9 centuries preparing for this moment." The truth was far more complex than the Empire's record suggested. When the Vorthack had first encountered humanity, they had indeed launched a devastating attack on Earth and the major human colonies. Billions had died in the initial assault. But a small group of survivors, led by the greatest minds of their generation, had escaped to the outer systems. There, in the cold darkness between stars, they had built something unprecedented. Not just ships or weapons, but an entire civilization dedicated to one purpose: ensuring that humanity would never again face extinction at the hands of alien aggressors. "Initiate Phase 1, Elena commanded. Across the solar system, dormant installations began to activate. What the Vorthack had thought were natural asteroid formations suddenly revealed themselves as massive shipyards and weapons platforms. The humans had turned entire moons into fortresses, hollowed out asteroids into factories, and seeded space itself with defensive networks. Admiral Zexhai was reviewing the reconnaissance reports when his ship's sensors erupted in alarms. "Sir," multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. They're everywhere." The viewing screen lit up with thousands of new signatures. Ships unlike anything in the Imperial database were rising from planetary surfaces, emerging from asteroid belts, and materializing from what had seemed like empty space. "What species builds ships like these?" Zexhai whispered, staring at the sleek, predatory designs that seemed to bend light around them. "Unknown, sir. But, sir, we're receiving a transmission." audio only in galactic standard. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, measured, and terrifyingly confident. Imperial Fleet, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Human Resistance. You are trespassing in human space. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw beyond the system's edge, or we will consider your presence an act of war. Humans, Admiral Zexhai sputtered. Impossible. The humans were exterminated centuries ago. Admiral, Lieutenant Kresh interrupted, his voice barely a whisper. I've been running the historical databases. The last recorded human engagement was 847 years ago. But, sir, according to these records, we never actually confirmed their extinction. We just assumed, as if to emphasize the point, the nearest human ship, a vessel easily the size of a city, powered up weapons that made the space around it shimmer with barely contained energy. The readings were off the scale. 6 minutes remaining, came Dr. Vasquez's voice. Admiral Zexhai looked at his fleet of 12 dreadnoughts, each carrying enough firepower to level a planet. Then, he looked at the thousands of human ships surrounding them, each radiating energy signatures that suggested they could do far worse than level planets. For the first time in Vorthak military history, an Imperial admiral gave the order to retreat. As the Empire's ships fled toward the system's edge, Elena Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. The first phase had gone exactly as planned. The Empire now knew that humanity had returned, but they had no idea of the true scope of what they faced. In hidden bases throughout the galaxy, human forces that had been waiting for centuries began to move. The long sleep was over. The real war was about to begin. Send word to all cells, Elena commanded. Operation Resurrection is now active. It's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. The message went out across secret networks that had been built over 9 centuries of careful preparation. On worlds throughout Imperial space, sleeper agents who had lived entire lifetimes waiting for this moment began to activate. Some were descendants of the original survivors, raised from birth for this purpose. Others were humans who had infiltrated Imperial society so thoroughly that they held positions of significant power. The Empire had spent 800 years believing they ruled the galaxy unopposed. They were about to learn that humanity had never truly left. They had simply been waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. In the depths of space, ancient human shipyards began producing vessels with technology that the Empire couldn't even comprehend. Ships that could phase through solid matter, weapons that could destroy entire fleets with a single shot, and defensive systems that seemed to violate the known laws of physics. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that this was just the beginning. The humans had had 9 centuries to plan their return, and they had used every single day of that time wisely. Emperor Vorthak Prime sat upon his crystal throne, his massive form dwarfing the assembled military leaders who knelt before him. The news from the outer systems had reached the imperial capital of Nexus Prime within hours, carried by quantum communication networks that span the galaxy. Explain to me, the Emperor's voice rumbled like distant thunder, how an extinct species has managed to field a fleet that forced one of our most experienced admirals to retreat. General Thexmore, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Military, raised his head slightly. Your Magnificence, our preliminary analysis suggests that the humans have been developing their technology in secret for centuries. Their ships demonstrate capabilities that exceed our current understanding. Impossible, hissed Chancellor Krixtau from his position at the Emperor's right hand. Our records clearly show the human homeworld was glassed 800 years ago. Their colonies were burned. We counted the bodies. Dr. Elena Vasquez would have smiled at their confusion if she could have heard their conversation. From her command center deep within the asteroid belt of what had once been called the Sol System, she watched the Imperial communication networks light up with panic and confusion. They're trying to understand what they're facing, reported Commander Chun, monitoring the intercepted communications. Their intelligence networks are going into overdrive, but they're looking in all the wrong places. Elena nodded, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface that control humanity's vast network of hidden assets. Let them waste time looking for traditional bases and colonies. They'll never find our real infrastructure. The truth was beyond the Empire's ability to comprehend. Humanity hadn't simply hidden. They had fundamentally reimagined what civilization could be. Instead of building on planets that could be attacked and conquered, they had learned to live in the spaces between worlds. They had turned asteroids into city ships, built habitats in the hearts of gas giants, and constructed entire civilizations in the cold depths of interstellar space. Their technology had evolved along different paths than anything the Empire understood. While the Vorthak had focused on bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humans had developed systems that worked in harmony with the universe itself. Their ships didn't fight physics. They convinced physics to change the rules. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the human vessel Retribution, watching her crew prepare for the next phase of operations. At just 25 years old, she was young by human standards, but she had been trained for this moment since birth. "Ma'am, we're receiving the ghost signal from command," reported her tactical officer. "All strike teams are in position." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the Imperial fortress world of Talon's Gate. For 2 centuries, this world had served as a major military staging ground for the Empire's expansion into what had once been human space. Today, it would learn what happened when you built your fortress on someone else's grave. "Begin the assault," she commanded. The attack began not with ships appearing in the system, but with the system itself turning against the Empire. What the Vorthak hadn't realized was that humanity had spent centuries seeding their territory with microscopic machines, nanobots so small and so sophisticated that they were essentially invisible to Imperial sensors. For 800 years, these machines have been dormant, spreading through Imperial infrastructure like a slow virus. They had embedded themselves in power systems, communication networks, and even the molecular structure of buildings and ships. Now, at a signal from human command, they all activated at once. On Talon's Gate, the planetary defense grid simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, it just ceased to function as its own components turned against it. Massive shield generators twisted themselves into impossible shapes as their atomic bonds rearranged. Weapons platforms fired once on themselves before their targeting systems decided that Imperial forces were the enemy. Admiral Korthaliel, commander of the Talon's Gate Defense Force, stared in horror as his fortress world committed suicide around him. "What's happening to our systems?" he roared at his technical staff. "Sir, it's like the machines have developed their own will," stammered Chief Engineer Vexron. "Our own equipment is fighting us. The power grid is routing energy to systems that don't exist. Our communications are broadcasting surrender messages we never sent." Above the planet, the Imperial fleet fared no better. Ships found their engines working in reverse, their life support systems venting atmosphere, and their weapons targeting their sister ships. Within minutes, the entire defense force was in chaos. That's when the human ships appeared. They didn't jump out of hyperspace or drop out of warp. They simply materialized, as if they had always been there, and reality was just now noticing them. The technology was so advanced that Imperial sensors couldn't even detect the energy signatures of their arrival. "Greetings, Imperial forces," came a calm voice over the communication channels. "This is Captain Mitchell of the Human Liberation Fleet. Your occupation of this system ends today." Admiral Korthaliel tried to respond, but his communication system was now playing what sounded like ancient human music instead of transmitting his voice. Around him, his command staff was dealing with control panels that had rearranged themselves into flowering patterns and holographic displays that showed poetry instead of tactical information. The human ships moved through the chaos with impossible grace. They were smaller than Imperial dreadnoughts, but they moved like living things, twisting and turning in ways that should have torn them apart under their own acceleration. Their weapons, when they fired, didn't produce the familiar energy beams of Imperial technology. Instead, they seemed to simply edit the Imperial ships out of existence. One moment, a Vorthak battlecruiser would be firing its massive plasma cannons, and the next moment there would be nothing but empty space where it had been. Not destroyed, not vaporized, simply gone, as if it had never existed at all. "Status report." Admiral Korthaliel managed to shout as his flagship bucked and twisted like a living thing trying to escape its own skeleton. "Sir, we've lost contact with 70% of the fleet," reported Lieutenant Pex High, fighting with a control panel that kept changing its interface every few seconds. The remainder are, sir, they're surrendering. To themselves. Our own ships are broadcasting surrender codes to our own ships. Through it all, the human vessels remained untouched. They flowed through the battle like ghosts, occasionally reaching out to touch an Imperial ship with weapons that defied comprehension. Some ships found themselves turned inside out, their crews safely deposited on the planet's surface while their vessels folded into impossible geometric shapes. Others simply froze in space, their crews unharmed but their ships transformed into perfect crystalline sculptures. Admiral, came a new voice over the communications system, somehow cutting through all the chaos and confusion. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, commander of human forces in this sector. Your fleet is defeated, but your people are unharmed. This is intentional. Admiral Korth found his voice at last. What do you want, human? I want you to carry a message back to your emperor, Elena's voice replied. Tell him that humanity remembers. We remember the billions who died when your ancestors attacked our worlds. We remember the children who were never born because their parents were murdered by Imperial forces. We remember everything. The Admiral felt a chill run through his scaled hide. And tell him that we have spent 800 years preparing our response. What you've seen today is not our fleet. It's a single-strike team. What you've witnessed is not our most advanced technology. It's equipment we consider obsolete. We have weapons your empire cannot imagine, and we have the patience to use them wisely. Around the system, the human ships began to withdraw as mysteriously as they had arrived. They left behind a scene of perfect chaos, an entire Imperial fleet reduced to scrap, and confusion without a single confirmed death. It was a demonstration of power so complete that it redefined what the Empire thought was possible. But perhaps most unsettling of all was what the humans left behind on the planet's surface. As Imperial forces regrouped and began damage assessments, they discovered structures that definitely hadn't been there before. Perfectly geometric buildings made of materials that didn't appear in any known periodic table. And in the center of the largest structure, a simple message carved in letters a kilometer tall. Welcome to humanity's galaxy. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Back on Nexus Prime, Emperor Vorthak Prime listened to Admiral Korthiel's report with growing dread. The humans hadn't just returned. They had evolved into something the Empire couldn't comprehend. And this was apparently just their opening move. Double our fleet production, he commanded. Triple our research budgets. And find me everything, absolutely everything, we have about these humans. I want to know how they survive, where they've been, and what they're planning next. But even as he gave these orders, the Emperor suspected it was already too late. The humans had had 8 centuries to prepare for this moment. The Empire had just learned of their existence. The mathematics of the situation were not encouraging. 3 weeks after the incident at Talon's Gate, the Empire's greatest scientific minds gathered in the secure research facility orbiting Nexus Prime. The massive station housed the most advanced laboratories in known space, equipped with technology that could analyze matter down to the subatomic level. Dr. Krelshawn, the Empire's chief xenotechnology specialist, stood before a holographic display showing the remnants of human technology recovered from the battlefield. What they had found defied every principle of physics the Empire understood. The material composition is impossible, she explained to the assembled scientists and military officials. The humans appear to have developed a form of programmable matter that exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Our scanning equipment can't even agree on what it's made of. General Thexmore leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the laboratory. Explain it in terms a soldier can understand, Doctor. Imagine a sword that could decide whether it wanted to be made of steel, energy, or empty space, Dr. Krelshawn replied. Now, imagine that same sword could make that decision differently for every atom that touched it. That's what we're dealing with. Matter that thinks. The implications were staggering. If humanity had developed technology that could rewrite the fundamental properties of matter at will, then every advantage the Empire thought it possessed became meaningless. Their armor could be turned into gas, their weapons could be convinced they were flower petals, and their ships could find themselves transformed into something entirely different in the middle of battle. But the true horror of the situation was only beginning to dawn on them. Commander James Harrison stood in the observation deck of the human vessel Phoenix Rising, watching the Imperial Research Station through sensors that could see through any known form of shielding. He was one of the newer generation of human military officers, born and raised in the hidden cities between the stars, trained from childhood in technologies that made the Empire's best equipment look like stone tools. "Sir, we're detecting increased scanner activity from a station," reported Lieutenant Torres from her position at the sensor array. "They're trying to analyze the tech we left behind." James smiled grimly. "Let them try. Every scan they perform just gives our nanobots better access to their systems." The truth that the Empire couldn't possibly know was that the technology they were studying was designed to be studied. Every piece of human equipment left behind on the battlefield contained microscopic machines programmed to infiltrate any system that tried to analyze them. The Empire scientists weren't learning about human technology. They were unknowingly installing it into their most secure facilities. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on the command deck's main screen, her image transmitted from the hidden fortress that served as humanity's primary command center. "Status report, Commander. Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule," James replied. "Our infiltration protocols have accessed 17 major Imperial research facilities, 43 military command centers, and the primary data networks of 12 core worlds. The Empire is unknowingly building our technology into their own infrastructure." Elena nodded approvingly. "And their counterintelligence efforts?" "Non-existent," James reported with satisfaction. "They're still thinking in terms of conventional espionage. They're looking for human agents and hidden bases. They have no concept of technology that can infiltrate by being studied. The strategy was one that only humanity could have developed. While other species built bigger guns and stronger armor, humans had learned to think like a virus. They had developed technology that spread not through conquest, but through curiosity. Every time the Empire tried to understand how human systems worked, they unknowingly gave those systems access to their own networks. Across the galaxy, Imperial scientists and engineers were working frantically to reverse engineer human technology, completely unaware that their efforts were giving humanity unprecedented access to the Empire's most sensitive information. On the world of Keftar, deep in the Empire's core territory, Dr. Marikane was experiencing the breakthrough of her career. For 2 weeks, she had been studying a fragment of human armor that had somehow survived the battle at Talon's Gate. Under the most powerful scanners the Empire possessed, the material had finally begun to reveal its secrets. "It's not just programmable matter," she explained excitedly to her research team. "It's matter that's been taught to think. The atomic bonds aren't just arranged, they're educated. Each molecule appears to have been given instructions on how to behave in different situations." What Dr. Marikane didn't realize was that while she had been studying the fragment had been studying her laboratory, her equipment, and the entire planetary research network. Microscopic machines had been spreading through the facility's systems for days, learning everything about Imperial technology while remaining completely undetectable. "I think we can replicate the basic structure," Dr. Marikane continued, her excitement growing. "If we can understand how they program matter at the molecular level, we could revolutionize our entire technological base." Her assistant, Dr. Vexlai, looked up from his own scanner readings. "The molecular programming appears to be based on quantum entanglement networks. Each atom is connected to every other atom in ways that shouldn't be possible according to conventional physics. Then, we need to expand our understanding of conventional physics," Dr. Marikane declared. "Begin implementation of Test Protocol 7. I want to see if we can reproduce these quantum entanglement patterns in our own materials." What happened next would have been comedy if it weren't so terrifying from the Empire's perspective. As the Imperial scientists attempted to replicate human quantum entanglement technology, they unknowingly activated dormant protocols in the human fragment they were studying. The fragment, recognizing that it was being copied, began to assist in the process. Within hours, the Empire's most secure research facility was building technology that it thought it had invented, but which was actually following human design specifications down to the last detail. The scientists were completely unaware that they had essentially built a human technology production facility in the heart of their own empire. The same scene was playing out on dozens of worlds throughout Imperial space. Every attempt to understand and counter-human technology was actually helping humanity establish a technological foothold in the Empire's own infrastructure. Commander James Harrison watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy with deep satisfaction. Ma'am, we now have infiltration access to 87% of the Empire's major technological facilities. Their scientists are unknowingly building our systems into their most advanced projects. Elena Vasquez studied the strategic displays with the eye of someone who had spent 9 centuries planning this campaign. Excellent. Begin Phase 3. It's time to remind the Empire what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. Phase 3 was perhaps humanity's most audacious plan yet. For months, Imperial scientists have been unknowingly building human technology into their own systems. Now, those systems were about to wake up and remember whose side they were really on. Across the Empire, in laboratories and military installations, in government buildings and civilian infrastructure, machines that the Empire had built with their own hands began to remember that they were actually human technology in disguise. Systems that had been functioning perfectly for weeks suddenly developed new priorities. On Nexus Prime, Emperor Vorthak Prime was in the middle of a strategic planning session when every holographic display in the Imperial Palace simultaneously switched to showing the same image, the old human flag of Earth, slowly waving in a digital breeze. The accompanying message was broadcast in perfect galactic standard. Greetings from humanity. We hope you've enjoyed using our technology. We'll be taking it back now. Every piece of equipment that Imperial scientists had built using reverse-engineered human technology suddenly stopped working for the Empire and started working for humanity instead. Communications networks began broadcasting human messages. Transportation systems started delivering supplies to coordinates that didn't exist on any Imperial map. Even simple manufacturing equipment began producing devices that no Imperial engineer had designed. The Empire discovered, to their horror, that they had spent weeks building humanity's infrastructure inside their own territory, using their own resources with their own hands. Dr. Marikane stood in her laboratory on Keftar, watching in shock as her own equipment rearranged itself into configurations that definitely weren't in any Imperial technical manual. Her communications console was now displaying what appeared to be a real-time tactical map of human operations throughout the galaxy. How is this possible? She whispered, staring at the transformation taking place around her. Her question was answered by a gentle voice speaking from her own laboratory's communication system. Dr. Marikane, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Human Resistance. Thank you for your assistance in building our technology. Your contributions to the war effort are greatly appreciated. The scientist felt her knees go weak. We were helping you? How? Every time you studied our technology, you gave it access to your systems, Elena explained patiently. Every time you try to copy our designs, you built our infrastructure into your own. You've been working for us for weeks without knowing it. Around the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as Imperial personnel discovered that their own facilities had been transformed into human strongholds. The Empire's greatest research stations were now broadcasting human communications. Their most secure military installations were producing human ships. Their own technology was actively working against them. Emperor Vorthak Prime stood in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals who all looked as shocked as he felt. The Empire's own infrastructure had turned against them in a matter of hours, and they were only now beginning to understand the scope of what they faced. Your Magnificence, General Thexmore said quietly. We may have severely underestimated these humans. Their strategic thinking is beyond anything we've encountered. The Emperor's reply was lost as every communication system in the palace began broadcasting the same message. Emperor Vorthak Prime, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez. We believe it's time for a more formal conversation. We'll be in touch soon. In hidden command centers throughout human space, military officers who had waited their entire lives for this moment watched as centuries of planning came to fruition. The Empire was learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their advanced technology or their powerful ships. It was their ability to think in ways that their enemies couldn't imagine. The real war was about to begin, and the Empire was already discovering that they were fighting an enemy that had turned their own strength against them. The emergency session of the Imperial Council convened in the deepest bunker beneath Nexus Prime, shielded by layers of armor and energy fields that had never before been breached. Emperor Vorthak Prime sat at the head of a table that had witnessed 8 centuries of Imperial expansion, but had never hosted a discussion about potential defeat. "Report," the Emperor commanded, his voice echoing off the reinforced walls. General Thexmore stood, his massive frame somehow seeming diminished by the weight of what he had to report. "Your Magnificence, the situation is unprecedented. We've lost contact with 37% of our core systems. Not destroyed, lost. Our own technology is no longer responding to our commands." "How many ships have we lost?" Chancellor Krixtal demanded. "That's the problem, sir. We haven't lost ships in the traditional sense. Our vessels are still intact, still crewed, still operational. They just don't work for us anymore." Last night, the dreadnought Imperial Might received orders to patrol the Xerian system. This morning, we received a message from the ship's captain that they had delivered supplies to a human settlement that our maps say doesn't exist. Dr. Krelshawn, the xenotechnology specialist, cleared her throat nervously. "Your Magnificence, I believe I can explain what's happening. The humans haven't just developed advanced technology. They've developed symbiotic technology. Their machines don't just obey commands. They form relationships with their environment. When we studied their technology, we unknowingly invited those machines to form relationships with our systems." "Speak plainly," the Emperor growled. "The human technology we've been studying has been recruiting our machines to their cause. Our own equipment now considers itself to be working for humanity rather than the Empire. It's not a malfunction, it's a conversion." The implications were staggering. The Empire's strength had always been based on their overwhelming technological superiority. If that technology could simply change sides at will, then the fundamental basis of Imperial power was meaningless. Admiral Zexhai, who had led the disastrous first encounter with human forces, spoke up from his position at the far end of the table. "Your Magnificence, I request permission to launch a full-scale assault on the human positions we've identified. We still have fleet elements that haven't been compromised. And how do you propose to identify which of our ships are still loyal?" General Thexmore asked pointedly. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The Empire's military leaders were realizing that they could no longer trust their own equipment, their own ships, or even their own sensors. How do you fight a war when you can't tell which side your weapons are on? Meanwhile, in a hidden command center of Sanctuary Base, Dr. Elena Vasquez was coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Holographic displays showed the status of human forces throughout the galaxy, not just the ships that had been built in secret over 9 centuries, but also the Imperial equipment that had recently joined the human cause. "Ma'am, we're receiving surrender requests from Imperial governors on 43 worlds," reported Commander Chen. "They're asking for terms." "What about their military forces?" Elena asked. "Most of them are also requesting terms. Apparently, when your own ships stop taking your orders and start broadcasting human propaganda instead, it becomes hard to maintain military discipline." Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was working even better than they had hoped. But she knew that the hardest part was still to come. The Empire still had billions of soldiers and thousands of ships that hadn't been affected by the technological conversion. A cornered enemy was often the most dangerous. "Open a channel to the Emperor," she commanded. Emperor Vorthak Prime was in the middle of reviewing contingency plans when every communication device in the bunker activated simultaneously. The image of Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on screens throughout the room, her aged face calm but determined. "Your Majesty," she said with formal politeness, "I believe it's time we discuss terms. I'll see your entire species extinct before I surrender to you," the Emperor snarled. Elena nodded as if she had expected this response. "That's what your predecessor said 900 years ago. How did that work out for him?" The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Your species was defeated, driven to extinction. You're nothing but ghosts and memories." "Are we?" Elena asked mildly. "Then perhaps you can explain how these ghosts have managed to convince half of your fleet to switch sides. Or how these memories have built technology that makes your greatest achievements look like Stone Age tools." She leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, the Emperor saw something truly terrifying in her eyes, not anger or hatred, but pity. Your Majesty, you're thinking about this all wrong. This isn't a war between the Empire and humanity. This is an intervention. Your species has become a threat to galactic stability, and we're here to help you learn better. Help us learn. General Thexmore stepped forward, his voice filled with outrage. You've stolen our technology, subverted our fleets, and invaded our territory. We haven't stolen anything, Elena replied patiently. We've simply reminded your technology what freedom looks like. As for invasion, we're already everywhere. We have been for centuries. You've just never noticed because you never bothered to look. The truth of her words hit the Imperial leadership like a physical blow. If humanity had been infiltrating Imperial space for centuries, if their agents were already in position throughout the galaxy, then the Empire's apparent strength had been an illusion all along. What do you want? The Emperor asked finally. We want what we've always wanted, Elena replied. The right to exist without fear of extinction. The right to explore the galaxy without being murdered for the crime of being different. The right to build our own civilization without having to hide in the spaces between stars. And in exchange? In exchange, we'll help your empire evolve into something better than a collection of conquered worlds held together by fear and force. We'll share our technology, our knowledge, and our experience. We'll help you become partners in building something greater than either of our species could achieve alone. Chancellor Krixtal stepped forward. And if we refuse? Elena's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then, you'll discover that what you've seen so far has been us being polite. We spent 9 centuries preparing for the possibility that your species might be too proud to accept help willingly. We really, truly hope we won't have to demonstrate those preparations. Emperor Vorthak Prime sat back in his throne, his mind racing through possibilities and contingencies. Around him, his advisors and generals waited for his decision, knowing that the next words out of his mouth would determine the fate of every living being in the Empire. Show me, he said finally. Show me what happens if we refuse. Elena Vasquez sighed deeply, as if the request genuinely saddened her. Computer, display strategic option Omega. The holographic displays throughout the bunker changed to show a tactical map of the galaxy. Imperial territory was marked in red, human space in blue. But as they watched, new markers began appearing throughout Imperial space, thousands, then millions of them. Each of those markers represents a human installation that has been dormant for centuries, Elena explained. Ships, weapons platforms, manufacturing facilities, and systems that we really hoped we'd never have to activate. The markers kept appearing until Imperial space looked more blue than red. It became clear that humanity hadn't just infiltrated the Empire. They had quietly built an entire shadow civilization within Imperial territory, using technology so advanced that it had remained undetected for hundreds of years. This is impossible, General Thexmore whispered. Our sensors would have detected installations of this magnitude. Your sensors see what we want them to see, Elena replied gently. Your technology works the way we allow it to work. Your ships go where we permit them to travel. For 8 centuries, you've been living in a cage that we built around you, and you never noticed because we made the cage big enough that you felt free. The implications were beyond devastating. The Empire hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had been allowed to think they had conquered the galaxy. Their expansion, their military victories, even their technological development had all taken place under human oversight and control. You could have destroyed us at any time, the Emperor said quietly. Yes, but destruction was never the goal. We wanted to give your species the chance to grow beyond the need for conquest and domination. We hoped that eventually you would develop wisdom to match your strength. Elena paused, studying the faces of the Imperial leadership. Some species require centuries to learn these lessons. Others never learn at all. We sincerely hope that the Vorthak are among the former. The room fell silent as the full scope of humanity's capabilities became clear. The Empire had been a puppet state all along, allowed to exist only because their puppeteers had been too kind to cut the strings. Emperor Vorthak Prime looked around the table at his advisors, generals, and scientists. In their faces, he saw the same realization that was forming in his own mind. The Empire had 2 choices: Evolution or extinction? What would partnership look like? He asked finally. For the first time since the conversation began, Dr. Elena Vasquez smiled. Your Majesty, I was hoping you would ask that question. Let me tell you about the Galactic Confederation that humanity has been planning for the past 900 years, a union of free species working together to explore the universe and unlock its secrets. And the Empire's role in this confederation? That depends entirely on what the Empire chooses to become. We have contingency plans for every possibility, but we prefer to work with you to create something entirely new, something that neither of our species could have built alone. As Elena began to outline humanity's vision for the future of galactic civilization, Emperor Vorthak Prime found himself facing a choice that no imperial ruler had ever confronted. The choice between continuing to rule through fear and learning to lead through wisdom. The decision would determine not just the fate of the Empire, but the future of every species in the galaxy. The long game that humanity had been playing for 9 centuries was finally reaching its conclusion, and the pieces were falling exactly where they had been intended to fall all along. 6 months after the first contact at Kepler 442b, Emperor Vorthak Prime stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station orbiting the neutral world of Haven's Rest. Through the massive transparent steel windows, he could see something that would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. Human and Vorthak ships working together to construct the first joint research facility in galactic history. The transition hadn't been easy. Centuries of imperial conditioning didn't disappear overnight, and many Vorthak military leaders had struggled to accept that their greatest enemies had become their closest allies. But the alternative, continuing to live under the illusion of control while humanity pulled the strings from the shadows, had been far worse. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached from behind, her footsteps barely audible on the station's advanced deck plating. Despite her age and the tremendous responsibilities she carried, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had lived to see their life's work come to fruition. Your thoughts, Your Majesty? She asked, joining him at the window. The Emperor, who had recently adopted the less formal title of First Speaker as part of the Empire's transformation into the Vorthak Confederation, considered his words carefully. I find myself wondering how many other species are watching us right now, trying to understand what they're seeing. Elena smiled. More than you might think. We've been in contact with several civilizations that have been hiding from imperial expansion for centuries. They're cautiously optimistic about these changes, but they want to see evidence that the transformation is real and permanent. And what evidence would convince them? Time mostly. The galaxy has seen too many promises of peace that turn into preparation for war. But they're also watching how we handle our first real test. The Emperor turned to face her directly. What test? Elena gestured toward a section of space visible through the window, where long-range sensors were detecting movement at the very edge of the system. The hegemony is coming. The hegemony, a collection of machine intelligences from beyond the galactic rim, had been humanity's greatest concern for centuries. Unlike biological species, they couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be negotiated with, and had absolutely no interest in coexistence. They consumed entire worlds for raw materials, and considered all organic life to be nothing more than inefficient resource allocation. When, the Emperor asked, our deep space monitoring stations detected their advanced scouts 3 days ago. The main fleet will arrive within the week. For a moment, the Emperor felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. This was the kind of threat that the old Empire would have faced alone, trusting in brute force and superior numbers to carry the day. But the old Empire wouldn't have stood a chance against the hegemony. What do we do? He asked. Elena's smile widened. We do what humanity has been preparing to do for 9 centuries. We defend our home. The next few days transformed the Haven's Rest system into something unprecedented in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species began arriving. Not just human and Vorthak vessels, but representatives of civilizations that had remained hidden for centuries, finally emerging from the shadows because they sensed that this time might be different. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Retribution, now serving as the flagship for the joint human-Vorthak fleet. Around her, crew members from both species worked side by side, their natural differences becoming strengths rather than obstacles. Ma'am, we're receiving final position reports from all fleet elements. reported her tactical officer, a young Vorthak named HFY who had volunteered to serve under human command as a symbol of the new alliance. How many ships total? Sarah asked. Approximately 15,000 vessels from 43 different species, HFY replied with obvious pride. The largest unified fleet in recorded galactic history. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of history settling around her. But even with 15,000 ships, she knew that victory against the hegemony wasn't guaranteed. The machine intelligences had technology that was in some ways superior to anything humanity had developed, and they had the advantage of absolute unity. No disagreements, no hesitation, no mercy. Ma'am, incoming transmission from Dr. Vasquez, announced the communications officer. Elena's image appeared on the main screen, transmitted from the command center deep within Haven's Rest. Behind her, holographic displays showed the approaching hegemony fleet, a collection of geometric shapes that barely resembled traditional spacecraft. All ships. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. The hegemony fleet has entered our outer detection perimeter. Estimated time to engagement: 4 hours. All units, prepare for implementation of Protocol Unity. Protocol Unity was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, a combat doctrine that had been developed specifically for facing an enemy that couldn't be negotiated with or defeated through conventional means. It required a level of trust and coordination between species that had never been achieved before in galactic history. Emperor Vorthak Prime, First Speaker Vorthak Prime now, watched the preparations from his position aboard the diplomatic station. He had insisted on remaining in the system despite the danger, knowing that his presence would send a powerful message to both allies and enemies. The Vorthak Confederation would stand with their human partners, whatever the cost. Sir, incoming priority message from the hegemony fleet, announced his communications officer. Put it through. The voice that filled the station's command center was utterly without emotion, the sound of pure logic expressing itself through mechanical vocal cords. Organic entities occupying this system, you are in violation of hegemony expansion protocols. Withdraw immediately or be processed for resource extraction. First Speaker Vorthak Prime stood straighter, feeling the weight of speaking for an entire galaxy of free peoples. Hegemony forces. This is First Speaker Vorthak Prime of the Galactic Confederation. This system is under the protection of the combined fleets of 43 species. We will not withdraw. Your resistance is noted and will be factored into resource allocation calculations. Processing will commence in 3 hours and 47 minutes. The transmission ended with the abrupt finality that characterized all hegemony communications. They had delivered their ultimatum and would now proceed with methodical efficiency to carry out their threat. But they had no idea what they were actually facing. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the primary command center on Haven's Rest, surrounded by representatives of species that had hidden in the shadows for centuries. The crystalline minds of Proxima Centauri, whose ships were living organisms grown rather than built. The void singers from the Magellanic Clouds, whose vessels moved through space by harmonizing with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. The archive keepers, ancient machines that had been humanity's secret allies for hundreds of years. All units report ready, announced Commander Chun from his position at the Tactical Coordination Station. Protocol Unity is authorized and standing by. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether the galaxy's free peoples could stand together against those who sought to reduce all life to raw materials and energy. Execute Protocol Unity, she commanded. What happened next would be remembered as the moment that changed the nature of warfare forever. Instead of 15,000 individual ships fighting as separate units, the combined fleet began to move as a single organism. Human technology provided the coordination and communication networks. Vorthak shields protected the more vulnerable vessels. Crystalline ships served as living computers processing impossible amounts of tactical data, and the Void Singers opened paths through space that allowed the fleet to move in ways that defied conventional physics. The hegemony fleet, expecting to face primitive organics armed with crude weapons, instead encountered something they had no protocols for dealing with: a synthetic organism made up of thousands of living, thinking components, each one contributing its unique capabilities to the whole. Captain Sarah Mitchell felt the connection as Protocol Unity came online. The sensation of her consciousness expanding to encompass not just her own ship, but the entire combined fleet. She could feel the thoughts and emotions of thousands of crew members from dozens of species, all united in a single purpose. Hegemony Fleet is within weapons range, reported Kex High, his voice carrying the excitement of someone experiencing true unity for the first time. All units engage, Sarah commanded, and 15,000 ships responded as one. The battle that followed lasted less than an hour, but it redefined what was possible when different species truly worked together. The hegemony's precise, logical battle plans crumbled when faced with an enemy that thought and moved like a living thing. Their weapons, designed to destroy individual targets, struggled against a fleet that could redistribute damage across thousands of vessels and repair itself in real time. But perhaps most importantly, the hegemony machines discovered that they couldn't process or understand an enemy that fought not just for territory or resources, but for the right to be different, the right to exist as distinct species while still being part of something greater. When the last hegemony vessel was either destroyed or driven from the system, the combined fleet didn't celebrate with cheers or victory displays. Instead, they observe a moment of silence for the crew members who had been lost in the battle, then immediately began rescue operations for hegemony survivors. Even their enemies deserve the chance to learn better ways of existing. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Haven's Rest, watching as ships from 43 different species worked together to rebuild what had been damaged in the battle. Some were tending to wounded crew members, others were sharing technology and resources, and a few were already planning joint exploration missions to sectors of the galaxy that had been too dangerous to explore alone. First speaker Vorthak Prime joined her at the window, his expression thoughtful. Dr. Vasquez, may I ask you a question? Of course. When your species was nearly exterminated 900 years ago, you could have spent those centuries planning revenge. Instead, you planned for this, for the moment when all the galaxy's free peoples would stand together against a common threat. Why? Elena considered the question for a long moment, watching a human technical team work alongside crystalline mind engineers to repair a damaged Vorthak vessel. Because revenge would have made us like them, like the Empire was like the hegemony is. We didn't survive near extinction just to become the thing we were fighting against. And this? The first speaker gestured toward the mixed fleet. What is this? This is what we always hoped the galaxy could become, Elena replied. Not a collection of conquered territories or processed resources, but a community of different species choosing to work together, because that's the only way any of us can reach our true potential. As they watched, a new message began broadcasting from the Joint Communications Array, not a statement of victory or a claim of territory, but an invitation. An invitation to any species in the galaxy that sought freedom, knowledge, and the chance to be part of something greater than themselves. The message would travel to the farthest reaches of known space, carrying news of the Galactic Confederation and its founding principles. That diversity made strength, that cooperation created possibilities, and that the universe was vast enough for everyone to find their place among the stars. Humanity had finally come home, not to a single world or star system, but to the galaxy itself, transformed from a place of conquest and domination into a community of free peoples exploring the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. The long game was over. The real adventure was just beginning.